in some sponsorship news, Geico will end its premier partnership with NASCAR after the season, marking the first time the racing circuit will lose one of the top-tier sponsors from the system. It started in 2020. That was reported by Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal. Kind of the first time we've seen that. They've been around for a long time, between sponsoring the Germain racing car and then now being a premier partner of NASCAR. Warren Buffett, he's just got so much cash. Doesn't know where to spend these days.
So that one is interesting to me. The next one I see on your list here is Stern reporting that FedEx is expected to continue reducing its sponsorship presence with Joe Gibbs Racing after this season, and could actually conclude the deal altogether, which would mean they would end their sponsorship with Joe Gibbs Racing and Denny Hamlin altogether. That one, so these two deals are interesting. There's not a super deep dive to be had here, but the FedEx one, I do want to point out, and this isn't like a I told you so or we knew already type thing, but that one doesn't surprise me. And my only interesting point about the whole thing is, like, we've been watching this happen, right? If you have been paying attention, or if you really watch the sport closely, you've been watching FedEx cut back, because it was not too long ago that FedEx was the, like, basically only remaining blue chip sponsor that sponsored every single race on a car. Right?
Yep.
And that was on the 11. And then it was almost groundbreaking when they cut back from that. Right? And then they've been just quietly and incrementally cutting back over the last few years that Adam mentioned in his tweet there. The part of it that's interesting to me is, I think we're so used to sponsors like up and leaving teams because they're in for 2 years and then they're out. And they're not that they're small deals. I mean, there's been big multi-million-dollar deals that are in and then out and then in and then out. But FedEx is a huge, huge deal. Like, this is, to me, they've been unwinding out for years. And that's what it would take to unwind this type of partnership. Because it's a 20-plus year partnership. It's a 20, 30, 40, $50 million a year potentially spend totally, not just on Joe Gibbs Racing, but all of the activation around it, the marketing strategy around it. So it's very possible that, 3 years ago, FedEx internally was like, hey, we need to end NASCAR. What's our unwind, our exit strategy out of NASCAR, right? Okay, here's how we're going to do it over the course of several years to wind down these assets without just completely abandoning them, because they have a tremendous amount of brand equity in the sport. So it's kind of interesting to me to see how a big brand like that sort of divests from the sport. And I don't want to see that. I wish they were increasing their involvement.
Yeah.
But
what it reminds me of?
This isn't just it's a gradually then suddenly type thing. The Geico thing to me, though, is a little bit more surprising. And maybe I'm not as intimate. Maybe we don't see how they've divested, but the Geico one is surprising to me because it was a big deal back in 2020 when NASCAR changed the dynamic from, like, title sponsorship of the series. We went from Monster Energy Cup Series to the Cup Series, and was that 2020 when they did that?
I think it was right around then. Yeah.
Right. It was right in that time, and they created this new model, and it was kind of like modeling after, I think they were inspired by Premier League and how they have their tiered sponsors. I actually don't know much about it. I just know that was where some of the inspiration came from, or where you could maybe mimic what they were doing. But, it was like multi-tiered sponsors instead of having titled sponsors. And so, for Geico, which is a brand that spends a ton of money in marketing and brand marketing and has been in the sport for a long time, to be cutting out of their premier partnership makes me wonder, like, is there some rest of the story we're missing? Are they moving it somewhere else? Or are we going to hear a different announcement? Is this really not a big deal? Or is this a sign that, like, that tiered sponsorship partnership just isn't a right fit or wasn't working? That part of it is more surprising to me, and I'd love to know more about it.
So on the FedEx thing, it reminds me so much of Miller Lite. You remember if they slowly but surely reduced until they were gone. And
Right.
I think they still do what Keystone Light does, a race or two with the 2-car still. But they did the same thing. It was like a gradual, quiet exit, and then they were gone. And I think it's a smart, for you put it, for companies and brands that have so much invested, not only just on the race car, but brand equity in terms of the program,
Right.
and racing, and people involved, and that sort of thing. It gives it sort of an exit plan, and is something that's not
I get
sudden and
fascinated
shocking.
and I don't even know. Maybe I'm just like concocting this thing that's in my head myself, but I get fascinated by thinking of that, putting yourself in the shoes of those CMOs and marketing executives that are making those decisions. That like the forward thinking, the long term thinking that they have. That like Miller Lite, FedEx, they know they've built so much equity in the sport that they can't just pull the plug. It would actually probably have a negative effect, a real negative effect on their brand, right?
Yep.
More negative
Yep.
than whatever 20, 30, 40, $50 million they'll save by cutting out of the sport, right? So
Yep.
they have to strategically say, okay, they might have decided 4 years ago that they're getting out of NASCAR,
Yep.
right? But it's like, okay, here's what it's going to take for us to truly get out of NASCAR without harming our brand, because there's a lot of people that look to FedEx to be involved in the sport, looked to Miller Lite to be involved in the sport. I would think especially a brand like Miller Lite, right?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's a graceful way to say goodbye. So we'll see what happens at FedEx. It's not goodbye yet. We don't know, but I'd be sad because I love the look of their cars, and I've always loved all the different paint schemes they do, and just think they were some of the best looking cars and so iconic. And Denny and that 11 car are so synonymous with them. It would be really weird not to see them in some capacity.